Welcome everybody to the weekly Tuesday night class in Chassidut, and we are learning now the letters of the Alter Rebbe, Igeret HaKodesh, in the Tanya, the fourth portion of the Tanya. We're learning chapter 26. We're right in the middle of the chapter. We're still asking the Alter Rebbe's questions. In short, we read from the Raya Mehemna and the Zohar, where it tells us, it seems to be that the statement has been that when Mashiach is going to come, we're going to learn the Torah, and there's not going to be the laws of purity and impurity anymore. In fact, that doesn't seem to make much sense. The Alter Rebbe asks at great length, because it's quite clear that every part of the Torah is holy and pure. So the Torah, the inner part of the Torah, is called Eitz HaChaim, the tree of life, which the tree of life is eternal and clear and pure. The Torah, which includes the revealed part of the Torah, is also considered the Eitz Hadat, the tree of knowledge, which can include both the good and quote-unquote bad. But the Torah has no bad. So how could the Raya Mehemna, based on the Zohar, even suggest that even some part of the Torah has in it a little bit, even if it's the potential of bad? The Torah is totally holy, even the words, like we talked in one of the earlier classes, even the words like Paro and Esav and Balak, Bilam, these words which are names of people which represent the epitome of the opposite of Kedusha, because they're part of the Torah, therefore they're also considered holy. So how is it possible that any iota, any letter, any word in the Torah can be considered part of the Eitz Hadat, the tree of knowledge? Isn't the entire Torah Eitz HaChaim? Isn't the entire Torah a tree of life, as the Alter Rebbe proved very clearly? The greatest proof is that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai himself, who wrote the Zohar, it says that he was he was number one in the entire Torah, especially in Nezikin, especially in the laws of damages, which if there's one part of the Mishnah, of the revealed part of the Torah, which seems to be most, I'm not sure, I don't want to say these words, but it seems to be most detached from the holy subjects, like korbanot, purity, sacrifices, the chagim, it's the damages. And even that, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai himself was the one who was the pro in Nezikin, in damages. There's going to be one more part of the question before we get to the answer. We're middle of page 127. Please look into your copies. And wherever you are around the world, we'll be watching our shir. Open up your Tanya, please, to the portion of Igeret HaKodesh, chapter 26. If you're in the lessons in Tanya, then it'll be on page 127. There is yet further cause to be exceedingly amazed at how those who lack understanding comprehend this quotation from the Raya Mehemna. This statement comes in addition to the two preceding causes for surprise at their misunderstanding of this quotation. Number one, that a portion of the Torah could be termed the tree of knowledge, of good and evil. Chas v'shalom to say that. And B, according to their understanding of the Raya Mehemna, the study of Isser v'Heter, laws of things which are not permitted and things which are permitted, does not supersede the obligation to pray at fixed times, even though the prayers were arranged according to the secrets of the Zohar and the supernal unions. Whereas the fact is that for those individuals, now we're on 128 at the top. Next copy. Whose only occupation is the study of Torah, the study of Isser v'Heter does indeed take precedence over the mitzvah of prayer. So every single part of the Torah really, essentially is holy and pure on the level of Eitz HaChayim, the tree of life. In addition to these things above, now the Alter Rebbe is going to ask another question, another wonder, V'od yesh lahafli, a major wonder, a major surprise. In addition to these two problematic queries, there is now a third. Here's the first Hebrew line of 128. Eich efshar sheliyemot HaMashiach lo yitztarchu leida hilchot iser v'heter tumah v'tara. Now the Alter Rebbe is asking a question legufo shel hanyan, into the essence of the actual matter, not in the title whether it's considered part of the tree of knowledge or not, or the tree of life. How is it possible to say that when Mashiach comes, we're not going to need it anymore, the laws of those that are permissible and those that are not, those of laws of purity and impurity? If you're suggesting that they're associated with the Eitz Hadat, the tree of knowledge, and then when Mashiach comes, we're only going to be associated with Eitz HaChayim, the tree of life, how can you say we're not going to learn these halachot anymore? How is it possible, now the English, how is it possible that in the days of Mashiach, people will not need to know the laws of ritual prohibition and permission and those of impurity and purity? Ki ech yishchatu hakorbanot v'gam chulin im lo yedu hilchot drasa v'chalada u'shehiyah haposlim hashchita u'pgimat hasakin. For how will they slaughter the sacrifices when Mashiach comes, and likewise animals for common use, just regular sacrifices, if they will not know the laws of drasa, chalada, and shehiyah? Any which disqualifies the slaughtering, and likewise the laws regarding a defective knife. I'm going to try not to get too graphic, but just to give you the points, and then we'll move on. Drasa means to press and to push. Lidros is like someone that crushes someone, so to speak. Chalada is passing under. Shehiyah means to wait. And slaughtering, obviously, there are many details of that. And a defective knife. In other words, there are different details on how a person is supposed to slaughter, and certain things which you're not allowed to do. So, for example, you're not when the knife goes through the throat of the animal, it has to go smoothly and cut like that smoothly, but it can't push. In other words, Hashem made the laws that it should be as painless as possible, and in fact, it apparently is totally painless. You're not allowed to wait even a split moment. It has to keep on going, chick-chack, in a split second, the whole thing is over. It has to go under the windpipe instead of over the windpipe. The knife has to be 100% smooth. Obviously, it has to be sharp. It can't have one tiny defect. And the time when you can actually watch this without having to go to a slaughterhouse, Bet Shchita, is on Erev Yom Kippur in the wee hours of the morning. We do the kaparot, and it's actually a custom to watch, even though it's hard for some people like me to watch, but it's a minhag to watch, and it's a split second, and it's part of the mitzvah. But you'll see that those shochtim, those slaughterers, who are extra careful, and one of those details when it comes to, you might have heard Chabad shechita, we're extra careful that the shochatim, those that slaughter, are extra Yirei Shamayim, extra God-fearing. They check their knife. They have a special way of checking the knife with the nail of the finger to make sure that it's 100% straight, smooth. Thank you. 100% smooth, and it's a headache to check it between every time they shecht, because, again, without getting too graphic, usually whether it's a whole line of animals, or they take the chicken, they go like this, to dip it into the water and to check the whole thing, to make sure that it's an extra, when you're talking about a line of thousands of chickens or thousands of animals, it could make this whole procedure much more expensive and much more and take much longer. So it is an extra level of Yiras Shamayim. It's easy, apparently, for the knife to be blemished if every time they do the slaughtering, so it's possible. Let's say they do 10 animals. Some people do 10, and they say, it's okay. You don't have to check every time. But what happens if after the first time the knife became blemished, and they didn't check, and after the 10th, you don't know which one between those two. So it could be there's a heter. I'm not saying that it's not kosher, chas v'shalom. But all I'm saying is that it is an extra measure of being God-fearing to make sure that every single animal, that there was no pegima, there was no blemish in the knife, and any of it, because it could be painful for the animal. Without getting, let's move on. I just wanted to. So all of these details may seem technical, and maybe not directly connected to the korbanot, how to eat this, who has to eat the sacrifices, and all the details about the zvachim, but how actually to slaughter these animals. So that you have to know, even when Mashiach is going to be here. You can't tell me, oh, those laws are are not going to be applicable. Those laws are part of the Eitz Hadat, the tree of knowledge. What do you mean? It's part of Torah. We're going to need them. Last Hebrew paragraph of the page. V'chi yivaled ish b'tivo, is there going to be a person, a human being, that can be born with in his nature, in his DNA, naturally, sheyehei shochet b'li sheyod rasa, that he'll slaughter without waiting or pushing. And the knife should also be healthy and strong and smooth without having any blemish forever. It's unheard of. We're human beings. The Torah was given to us, and all the details of the laws are given to us too. The Torah was given to human beings, so we have to go according to these laws. Let's do the English. Will there ever be born a man who by his very nature will invariably slaughter without shehiyah or drasa, like we said earlier? Will the knife also remain perfect and unblemished forever? What do you mean? We're human beings. This is a physical world. The Torah was given to us, a beautiful message. The Torah was given to us, to human beings. And we have to act according. Torah gives us tools to be able to do whatever we have to do, in this case, to prepare the animals properly. Since these are physical impossibilities, people will obviously have to know the practical laws governing ritual slaughter. Page 129 at the top. V'od harbe halachot, and many more laws. Chelev, vadam, ush'ari yisur, and there are also many more laws relating to sacrificial offerings and so on, such as those regarding fat, blood, and other prohibitions. Moreover, the gam tumat hamet yutzrichen leida, even the impurity of a dead corpse we're going to have to know. K'dichtiv, as it says in the verse, Hana'ar ben mea shana yamut. Even when Mashiach comes, there will be this concept, at least I'll explain in a second, at least at a certain stage, where 100 years, Hanar, the youth, but ben mea shana, 100 years, yamut, it's a verse, will die. People then will also need to know the laws regarding the impurity imparted by a corpse. As it is written, a young man will die at the age of 100. Because we're not going to age when Mashiach comes. But there will be this concept. And if there will be death in the world, these laws will of course be needed. So I'd like to just explain this for a moment. What I'm going to say now, can be understood on many levels. For example, okay, first let me say it, then I'll explain it. There will be at least 2 stages when Mashiach comes. Now it's possible that there will be only one stage. But generally speaking, as I'll explain in a minute, we have 2 options, 2 stages. Not only 2 options, but 2 levels, 2 stages. There is the first stage, which is more of a world which is ongoing, a normal world the way we know it to be. And then there will be a totally supernatural world. That's the next stage. That's the classic stage that we're talking about when we say the Messianic era. We think of, we have an image in our mind of only souls, or it could even be bodies, but we're not going to have to eat and sleep. We're going to be all spiritual, like a tzaddik. The other stages, everything is regular, everything is ongoing. The Rebbe once said, actually in 1991 in the summer, exactly 30 years ago, the Rebbe said that some people, they may not want Mashiach to come because they'll say to themselves, well, what's going to be with all of my connections, my friends, my business associates? People say, what, you're going to take this all away from me. So I want this to be, I want to keep this stuff. I don't want this so to speak, all spiritual scenario.
Sounds like spies.
That's exactly very good. The spies wanted, they wanted to stay in the desert. I like your input, because you always come up with the Hasidic teachings that we've been teaching. So for you, it's all the Hasidic teachings are all understood, are all taken for granted. It's amazing. Kol hakavod to you. That's great. So that was a cut and paste, an example of a Messianic era. Another example is the days of the flood. According to Kabbalah, that was a glimpse into how it's going to be. Those that were in the ark, in the Tevat Noach, that's why they had every type of animal, which is a symbol of Vigar Ze'evim Keves, that the wolf will lie with the lamb. Once again, we have this concept of everyone being together, which is impossible under regular circumstances. So, let's give you a couple of examples. We have, the first example is what it says in the Gemara. The Gemara says that a Mashiach could come in we're going to read it in the Haftorah one of these weeks now, that we're reading the weeks after Tisha B'Av, of comfort. So it says over there, the Mashiach can come Be'ita achishana. Be'ita means in its time. Ita is from the word et, ayin taf. It's like zman, but et is also means time. Achishana means hastening, before its time. One place it says the Mashiach is going to come on a horse, on a donkey, right? Chamor Rosh HaMashiach. And the other place it says that he's going to come Va'aru imanan ishmaya, cruising on the clouds to Eretz Yisroel, to Yerushalayim, right here. And there are a number of other examples throughout the Torah, in the Talmud specifically, that suggest two different scenarios. So which one is it? So the Rebbe explains in a fascinating number of places, but especially one talk. Also the Talmud, I have to mention this because that's really the basis of the Rebbe's talk, is that Shmuel says a very interesting statement. Ein bein olam hazeh limot HaMashiach ela shibud malchiot bilvad. There is no difference between the era now, before Mashiach comes, and when Mashiach comes, only subservience to kingship, to government. When Mashiach comes, we're not going to be subservient anymore to any foreign governments. Even Eretz Yisrael, unfortunately, the governments around the world, they try to force us, try to dictate to us what to do, and we have to listen to our spiritual government. That Eretz Yisrael, Eretz Sheratzta La'asot Ratzon Kona. So, is that the only difference between now and when Mashiach comes? We're not going to be any more subservient to other governments. Aren't we going to be? Aren't there many deeper concepts? Revelation of godliness in the world, the knowledge of Hashem will be all. We're going to learn Torah. We're going to go deeper and deeper into the infinite sea of the Torah. All day, that's all we're going to do. Even Gashmiut, at some stage, we're not going to even. We're going to live off the knowledge of Hashem like the angels. The answer is, Rebbe explains in a long talk. It's called Shtei Tkufot. There will be two periods when Mashiach comes. There will be the period of the first period, where the world will be quote-unquote regular. Like the Rebbe said, people are worried, oy vey, what's going to be when Mashiach comes? Nothing to worry about. In the first stage, everything will be regular. Have the regular homes, trees, cars, everything. Don't worry, all your connections, all your relationships are all going to be there. Assuming that there's nothing which contradicts spirituality. Because it's going to be the first stage in Mashiach's era, it's going to have to be, if someone is around, it's going to have to be someone who, all of Am Yisrael is going to be here. Those of us, those that are not part of Am Yisrael, if they are part of, they recognize Hashem, V'ra'u kol amei ha'aretz, the nations of the world will see and recognize Hashem. In the first stage, they will also be there. Because they recognize Hashem. And there's not going to be any more killing, there's not going to be any more theft, and so on and so forth. Nothing bad is going to be, because it's going to be a good world. Like we talked about earlier in the beginning of this chapter, like Etz HaChaim, a tree of life. No more tov v'ra, no more good and bad, just good. No more mixture of good and bad, only good, only life. In the second stage, there will be all spirituality. I'm not sure exactly, we'll have to find out soon, Be'ezrat Hashem, but there's not going to be the regular stuff. It's going to be closer to what we imagine that an all spiritual world. So, whether when it says Hanar ben mea shana yamut, then it means literal death, or it means metaphorical death. For example, the Mishnah says a 5-year-old for learning Mishnah. This is in Pirkei Avot. 5-year-old learning Chumash. 10-year-old learns Mishnah. 13 years old goes through 20, 30, 40, and it goes to 90, and then it goes to 100. It says Ben mea ki'ilu met v'avaru batal min ha'olam. It says if he passed away, and then he's batel, is nullified from the world. Chassidus says that it doesn't mean literal death. It's the highest level of connection to Hashem. It's batel benal, that the worldly matters are nullified, but the person can be living over here and living in the neshama in the body experiences the highest levels of connection with Hashem. Same thing over here. It could be that it's not literal death, but it could be that it is. But that would be in the first stage. Definitely. So in the first stage, there will be the concepts of death. We're not sure exactly. In Hebrew, they say a slang, ma, mi, mu. What, who, when. It's like similar to what you're saying, but it sounds cooler in Hebrew. We don't know exactly how, when, how it's going to happen, what the details are. But one thing we know, that in the first stage, there may be these details of tum'ah and ta'ara, impurity and purity. And in the next stage, it will be all good, all pure, and all holy. It's possible, by the way, that we're not even going to need the first stage. It's very possible that we will need, but you never know. That's why it says, we said earlier in the Talmud, that there's be'ita, the Mashiach will come in the right time, or Mashiach will come achishana, will come quicker, before the time. Or in one place it says that we said that Mashiach is going to come on a donkey. Another place it says the Mashiach will come in the clouds. It's basically two steps, two types of processes. We hope and pray that the process will be the second one, which is all spiritual, supernatural, miraculous, and so on and so forth. And we may be able to skip the first stage and go right into the all spiritual stage directly. Here's another example. Let me just finish the question, please. Perhaps after the class we can discuss the questions. Thank you. Here's another example of where purity and impurity may be relevant when Mashiach comes. The third Hebrew line in 129. V'gam tumat yoledet tzarich ledah. And also the impurity of a woman who gives birth, we're going to need to know. Dichtiv, as it says in the verse, when Mashiach comes, hara v'yoledet yachdav. A woman who is pregnant and one who gives birth, yachdav, they'll be together. By the way, it says when Mashiach comes, it's going to be like when Am Yisroel was in Mitzrayim and every woman gave birth to 6 children at a time. It's going to go back to these miraculous times. So basically, we're not going to need the 9 months of labor, which the Torah says was sort of a punishment for Chava. It's going to be immediate. The child will be born. It will be further necessary to know the laws of governing an impurity of a woman who has given birth, as it is written, a pregnant woman and one who gives birth together will be among those restored to the Holy Land at the time of the redemption through Mashiach. So here, listen to this. Im teleit isha b'chol yom mevia achat. If a woman will give birth every day, it's amazing. I can see how the woman's faces are the eyes. Your eyes are rolling. I just said, "Don't worry, it's going to be amazing. It's going to be cool." Even this, as I say in Hebrew, is yeah cool. It's going to be yeah cool. In the time to come, pregnancy will not last 9 months. On the same day that a woman conceives, she will give birth. Moreover, additional children will be born on successive days from that same conception. So there will be the concept. It's hard for us in a sense, we don't know exactly how it's going to be, but there will be the concept of purity and impurity. It's going to be much quicker. Though it takes a certain amount of time for a woman to become pure. The whole process, I mean, you can even ask, doesn't it say that Mashiach is going to come when all of the neshamas from above are born? So if Mashiach comes after all the neshamas come down, so what does it mean that there will be the idea of pregnancy and birth when Mashiach comes? So we'll find it when Mashiach comes. We'll find all of it. We're just trying to give a couple of points how we find that purity and impurity will be around when Mashiach comes, and nevertheless that will be Eitz HaChaim, the tree of life. Unlike it seems to be at first glance. Soon we'll see why not. Perhaps in the next class. But we'll find out how it's possible. What it seems to be from the Raya Mehemna is that all these technical laws of purity and impurity are connected to the tree of knowledge, which may indicate some bad, quote-unquote, impurity. But no, all of these laws will apply when Mashiach comes. The Afal Pikein, and nevertheless, page 130, the top of the page, in the lessons in Tanya, Afal Pikein, Din Isur Tumata lo yishtana. Nevertheless, laws with respect to restrictions resulting from her impurity will not change. It will thus be necessary to know the laws regarding the ritual impurity of a woman who has given birth. Okay, so here's a side note, but I feel that it's very important, so we're going to read it. The Rebbe writes that the above elucidation, that a woman will give birth on the very day that she conceives, accords with the explanation by the Arizal. We'll skip the square brackets in Likutei Hashas, 2.5 lines from the end of this paragraph, last word on the line. I'm sorry, we're over here at 2 lines from the bottom. It differs from this paragraph. It differs from the commentary of Rashi of Tractate Shabbos 30b, commenting on the above, next paragraph. Commenting on the above quoted phrase, a pregnant woman and one who gives birth together, from which the Gemara derives its teaching that in future time a woman will give birth every day. Rashi explains that on the day a woman conceives a new child, she will bear a previously conceived child. For, as a Marsha explains, it cannot mean that the conception and birth of the same child will take place on the very same day. For then, the proof offered there in the Gemara regarding a chicken that laid eggs daily would not apply. For even a chicken Okay, let's look at page 131, the second paragraph. The Rebbe concludes, this also solves the problem raised by the Marsha. This is the point that I wanted to bring out. In his Chidushi Agadot, the Marsha asks, how can there possibly be additional births on the subsequent days when marital relations are forbidden for 7 or 14 days after birth, depending if it's a male or female? So you're saying on one hand that the laws of purity and impurity will apply. On the other hand, you're saying that every day the woman can conceive and give birth on the same day and the next day. This question is answered by the above statement that successive births will result from a single conception. This statement also accords with a reference made in the Gemara, as we said earlier. Okay. Interesting. The Rebbe also refers to the Gemara, which in the next paragraph, which relates that a certain woman's conception resulted in the birth of 2 children 3 months apart. So we find that it's not only something of that's going to be when Mashiach comes, but we do see the concept that it did happen already. Next, the Hebrew line. There is no need to dwell on something so obvious as the fact that these laws will still apply in the time of Mashiach, so that then too it will be necessary to know the laws of Isser v'Heter and purity and impurity. It's clear that when Mashiach will come, we will need to know these laws. When the entire Talmud and the Midrashim make known the reverse of the misleading impression formed by the superficial reading of our opening quotation from the Rechavia, page 132. For example, the question is asked, a law for the time of Mashiach. Why state now a law that will only apply to Messianic times? We have the concept of Hilchas Mashiach. We have laws that apply only to when Mashiach comes. So what's the point of learning about it now? When Mashiach comes, we'll know it. The third Hebrew paragraph. Likewise, we find that Eliyahu will come to clarify all doubts, and this passage Eliyahu will expound in the future, and so on. It's also not understandable in the statement in the Rechavia that the Torah scholars will not be sustained by illiterate people, and so on, as stated above. The tree of knowledge, good of evil, which is the root of Isser and Heter, prohibitions and things which are allowed, which will not dominate the Jewish people, because the Torah scholars will not be sustained by illiterate people. Nor by the mixed multitude who eat that which is ritually unfit, impure and prohibited, heaven forbid. Last Hebrew line of the page. This is not something new when Mashiach is going to come. Also in the time of the second Beit HaMikdash. Let's read the bottom Hebrew line of the page. Even during the time of the second temple, they were not supported by the illiterate people who ate that which is ritually unfit and prohibited, heaven forbid. For the Torah scholars had fields and vineyards of their own, just like the illiterate people. Back to square one. Nevertheless, they would still learn these parts of the Torah which do involve purity and impurity and prohibitions and things which are allowed. Nevertheless, they engage in the study of the laws of Isser and Heter and of impurity and purity. For example, all the pairs of leading sages who lived at the time of the second temple, they raised disciples in the legal of the Torah in the thousands and the tens of thousands. While the study of esoteric of the Torah took place in secret and so on. So which part of the Torah was learned at great length was the revealed part of the Torah. And they were able to sustain themselves, similar to how we when Mashiach comes. And the hidden part of the Torah, which is going to be the main part of learning Torah when Mashiach comes, that was only a very few, only a select few were able to learn the teachings of Kabbalah in those days. Look at the second Beit HaMikdash and so on. We thus see that the fact that Torah scholars need not be sustained by the illiterate is in no way a cause for their not studying, God forbid, the laws of Isser and Heter and purity and impurity. So in summary of everything that we've learned a very long question for a few shiurim. And as I explained at the end of last shiur, that even a question in Kabbalah is like an answer. A question in Nigla Torah, especially in Chakira, which is an investigative part of the Torah. So, investigative part of the Torah, it's let's say it's less learned in Chassidus, because Chakira basically is investigating. I don't want to say it, but just I have to. Is there a God or is there not a God? Chassidus, you'll never find a question like that. Is there a God? The question is, what is the level of Keter? What is the level of that level? How great is Hashem? And we find out how He's greater than great, and there's no limit to His greatness. But you'll never find a question of, is there a God or not? So, Chakira is definitely, if it's taught by the Rambam or other great sages, it is part of Torah, but you'll find less and less where Chassidus discusses and relates to these subjects, and Chassidim don't usually learn those in those parts of the Torah. But nevertheless, we do have questions of Chassidus. So the questions, since the questions are all with a preconceived notion that there is a God, the question is, if there is a question, then how great is He, and what is this level, what is that level? So even a question is geschmack, is wonderful, it's very is very exciting and tasteful. So in summary, we've just learned another part of the question of how could we even suggest, how can someone even misunderstand what the Raya Mehemna talks about, and seems to suggest that when Mashiach comes, we're not going to be learning the laws of purity and impurity, for example. Because we learned today, as the Alter Rebbe said, when Mashiach comes, we will be learning the laws of purity and impurity. We will be learning the laws of shechita, of slaughtering. And so therefore, it's impossible to understand, even mistakenly, that the revealed part of the Torah can be part of the tree of knowledge, which can include good and bad, chas v'shalom. Doesn't even have bad, even potentially. There is absolutely not 1 ounce of bad in any part of the Torah. In the next class, on page 134, we're going to start the answer. This way you know that we're coming towards the answer, B'ezrat Hashem. And if you're watching this year online, just hopefully very soon we'll be able to click to the next year and learn the answer, so you'll be able to sleep the night and not be totally exhausted from not understanding the answers to the question. Toda Rabba, all the best. Have a wonderful evening, a wonderful day.